So, oh, we're live.
We're live.
I think, yeah.
How are ya? We heard you're in class virtually. She's in class virtually. Isn't that great? Isn't that nice?
You know, COVID wasn't all that bad, I guess.
No. Yeah, I like the idea that I can hang up on my boss and be like, oh, the Wi-Fi is bad. I'm so sorry. I guess I'll be back tomorrow.
We're live, right?
We're live.
This
isn't it.
Tonight.
Yeah, this is
All
an
right.
admission. He knows.
I'm going to close the door for us. It is going to be loud when it opens.
Okay,
So
all right.
be mindful of that. And there's some more seats on the other side.
Okay.
And you can, I'll put one or two chairs out before.
Yeah, we actually had a really great showing. This is a really nice crowd.
Is that what it is? Oh, are you doing your class?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was studying to be a hero. Also, the teacher.
Oh, so she's.
I love it. That's 55,000 right there. It is.
Do you do stand-up comedy too?
Yeah, that's my day job. All right.
Hopefully the live works.
Yeah,
I don't
actually,
really know.
3 people are on.
Oh, all right. so
Hi.
it works.
Okay, so without further ado, I want to welcome you all to my first poetry talk. I'm Briana Serradas. I am the inaugural Poet Laureate for Attleboro, and today I have the absolute pleasure to introduce you to Tarah Valin, who is a wonderful, inspirational poet, student. She's studying English at the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts with a great art museum, as we all just heard. And today, our format of our presentation is going to be, she's going to do a little bit of reading. We're going to just listen to that, and then we're going to do a free form discussion, and then we'll open it up to any questions. Because we have such a small group, we can definitely work more organically. If you have a question, you can blurt it out. If you have comments, if we want to sit, maybe say, oh, Tara, take it back. Let's do that poem one more time. We can definitely do that. This doesn't look like it's going to be a very rowdy crowd. So, well, I don't know. You guys can surprise me. So, without further ado, Tarah Valin.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Oh, yeah. So this is Tara's book, Wilting Daisies. You can find it at Amazon.
And at the library now?
Yes.
So you can check it out. Okay, so I self-published this book in high school, my senior year. And I don't really look at it much anymore, but I had to crack it out again for Briana. And so I figured I'd kind of regale you with some of my old poems from this book, and then kind of put them in conversation with my newer pieces. So I figured, of course, thank you, I'd start out with my love poems. Please. These are from high school, so let's, strap in your seatbelts. Here we go. Okay. The first one that I'm going to read is called My Nerd. I created constellations with your name. Now I have galaxies constructed around your memory, and I never saw Star Wars, but you made me want to watch them all just so I could be sheltered beneath your extraterrestrial glow. You stripped me of the stars, yet you ask why there are craters in my heart. I made you my everything, and now I'm a black hole. First one. And then, thank you. This next one is still from the book, and it's called I Love You More. We competed for each other, goodness, so young, so stupid. We both thought it was love. We both thought it was something. We thought it was real. No, you knew. I was the idiot who believed in fates written in stars, forevers built off of temporary moments. Goodness, I don't love you. but I would have swam across the Atlantic for you, or is it the Pacific? I didn't know much, but I thought that we had forever. But you knew better. This next one is called Pardon Me. And I'm going to end with this one because, well, for this section, because it's so dramatic. You'll hear it. All right, this one's called Pardon Me. I don't mean to be a bother, but my heart is splintering and fragments of broken glass are scratching against the walls of my hollow chest, and I was wondering if you had some glue. I know it's late, but demons in the form of thoughts of you race around my mind, and I was wondering if you could perform an exorcism. I know you gave up, but every shallow breath that I drag into my decrepit lungs reminds me of how much I don't want to be alive without you, and I was wondering if you had a noose. So that was kind of like, oh, no, that's false. I'm not ending with that one. Hold on. So the book is called Wilting Daisies. And that title is derived from this poem that I found on Tumblr in like middle school, angsty days, by Julie Martinez, who I don't even think writes poetry anymore. But the poem is, I have it memorized, but I don't want to misquote it. But it reads, and it's in the beginning of the book. Hold on. And if you don't like me as I do you, I understand, because who would really choose a daisy in a field of roses? Julie Martinez. And I reached out to her on Instagram, and I was like, can I put your poem in my book? And she was like, okay. And so this poem is titled Julie Martinez. Good God, you're beautiful, beautiful like a black rose, hidden beauty, dark magic, something mysterious, something tainted. While I focused on the petals, you focused on the thorns. You were torn and I wanted to fix you. I wanted to be the beauty to your beast, but I realized some beauties just aren't beautiful enough. I saw the light. All you saw was tunnel, tunnel, tunnel. I wanted to pluck you out of the crack in the sidewalk, but who plucks weeds? I am a daisy, surrounded by the most gorgeous tulips and lilies, but you loved me anyway. We were a broken bouquet, unwanted, the type that is never bought. You told me I was beautiful. I didn't see it. Black magic, honey for the bees. You kept the daisy tucked behind your left ear until you finally decided you'd like to return to plucking roses.
No.
Thank you. So those were a couple love poems from Wilting Daisies. And since then, all my poems are still dramatic, but I like to think that I have refined the drama so that it's more palatable. And speaking of palates, my first poem is called Cold. I guess ice cream is love. You can't spell love without an E. There's two of them in ice cream, so love and ice cream are synonymous. They go together, like hot fudge and cookies and cream, or better yet, like hot caramel and coffee ice cream. In 5th grade, I fancied myself in love with this mixed boy. His skin was a caramel macchiato, iced, of course. And I wrote poems about him in my spare time because that's what you do when you're in love with ice cream. Boys are like ice cream, so many flavors, so many different kinds, soft, hard, unavailable, limited time only, but at the end of the day, they're all really the same. Fleeting, their attention spans, their interests, their love, it doesn't last much longer than an ice cream cone. I suppose I learned I was in love with ice cream when I wrote a poem about my favorite dairy bar. My parents have been going there since before I was born. That's probably why it tastes so good to me. I was born to eat it. My destiny is churned with rum raisin, though I suppose my mom wasn't eating rum raisin while she was pregnant with me. There's a superstition that if you eat a lot of corn while you're pregnant, your baby will be light-skinned. And if you drink honey while you're pregnant, your baby will have light brown eyes. And I am disturbed by this obsession with lightness. I guess you could call it white lust. I've definitely called it white lust in a few poems about love. Poems about boys somewhere in between the shades of vanilla bean and butter crunch. You always want the flavors that are unavailable, the flavors that are for a limited time only, ever around when you aren't around to try them. I guess the caramel macchiato boy and I don't mix. He was too much of a gelato to look cute with such a stock, run down, $2 or less for a cone, soft serve flavor like myself. Now I've learned that I range from Kahlua chip to mocha chip in the winter, and sometimes I'll drop down to a brouhaha if I spend too much time indoors in the summer. Anyway, now I've learned that boys come in so many different flavors, and it doesn't matter which brand I am or what flavor I look like today. There are just some flavors that do not, will not, cannot mix. The kind of boys I used to chase after are all men now, and they look to me like wild berry, purple cow, and sometimes cotton candy. And it does not matter how strange your tastes are, how much you try to diversify and interracialize your cone, you learn cotton candy and Colombian coffee do not go together. I used to think that only white people fall in love and stay in love. Something about the uncomplicated vanilla bean, French vanilla, coconut, cheesecake, Irish cream. See, they always go together there. There's no clashing of palates here. They're all pleasing to the ear. It does not take years of litigation and a court case against the state of Virginia to convince anyone that vanilla bean and French vanilla go together. There are no states where these two flavors cannot cuddle in the same cone, but now I know. Ice cream is love. And love is ice cream. It's taken some time, but slowly, I've learned how to layer my flavors correctly. Okay, now I mentioned a dramatic flair, and you're in for a treat if you like it. So these are my 14 liners. I call them sonnets, but they're not proper sonnets. And my English teacher is in the back, and I don't want to get in trouble. So these are a set of 3 14-liners, all by the same name. If you let me love you like a love poem. If you let me love you like a love poem, I wouldn't have to compare you to a summer's day. I wouldn't have to compare you to anything because you, honey, are inimitable. The way I feel about you is inevitable. You haunt me from when I wake to when I sleep, if I sleep, because you keep me roused, which is to say you arouse me, my very own incubus. You prey on me as I slumber, making me want to hate you. I hate you in the morning when I see you walking her to class. I hate you in the evening when you leave me for her. I hate you when you complain. Hate the way you were before you met her, when it was just us, when I thought I had a chance, when I dreamt of our first dance. Now my dreams transformed into delusional nightmares where you tempt me all night long, then leave. If you let me love you like a love poem, I would love you like a sonnet. I would build a fence around our 14 lines of love to ensure our longevity. I would love you until it didn't make sense. My friends would tell me to be careful, but there's nothing careful about poetry. Love is sort of like flirting with death. Betting your mental health on someone, knowing humans are fragile creatures. I would love you the way broken girls try to fix men. I would love you like therapy. I would tear you apart until you did not recognize the you before me. I would destroy you. Isn't love just destruction? Isn't it seduction to create addiction to a person to make you need? If you let me love you like a love poem, I would crave your mouth, your voice, your hair. They would contact every magician they know to conjure up a potion, an anti-poison. They would call up Jesus and ask him how he did that trick with Lazarus. They would call up Lee Harvey and John Wilkes Booth and study what they did to do a reverse and inverse assassination. They would have to master the art of resurrection because I want to eat your hot heart. I cannot let death consume you. I need to be the one to eat you from the inside out. I must breathe life into you. I want to be your ventilator, so you need my lips on yours to breathe. I want to swallow you whole. If you let me love you like a love poem, I would imbibe your love and bury you in my chest. Thank you. And as I mentioned, the drama, it gets worse. All right, here we go.
It gets worse.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you. I love this piece. It's incredibly chaotic, and I'm going to take you on a ride. So if your seatbelts weren't strapped before, irreplaceable you. I'm crying at this really terrible Netflix movie where the girl dies in the end or in the beginning, depending on how you look at it, or if you skip to the boring scenes and kissing scenes like I do, no. I'm meeting you for the first time and I whisper in your ear, I thirst, or you're the worst. It depends on who you ask. Maybe I said, my bladder is about to burst. Either way, I left the booth and ran to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I'm quite unversed in these things, no. I'm staring at my reflection and wondering if I'll drown if I jump. Will this be the beginning or the end of my YA novel youth? I jump off a whim and things are looking grim because I can't swim. So I flail my limbs or begin to sing as the water fills my lungs. No. I'm on my bed, limbs spread as far as the east is from the west, not quite dead, instead swiping through Tinder or Hinge or Bumble on a Friday night, so basically dead, or at least barely alive. The movie is almost over, and the main character isn't dead yet, or maybe she's been dead the whole movie, depending on how you look at it, and I'm somewhere far off, staring in the mirror, trying to revive myself, while you twiddle your thumbs in the booth, stirring a melting milkshake, or maybe I'm right here, teetering between dead and unalive, swiping left on John or Mark or Brandon or Andrew or Daniel or Cody, or maybe Nick will make me want to stick around, or he'll see that I want to drown, so he'll run, so I swipe left. No. I sit across from you, and I want to run my fingers through your hair, or wrap my hands around your throat, or make you want me, or stab you with a butter knife, or kiss you, or kill you, depending on who you ask. No. What? I blink. And some woman I pay way too much to psychoanalyze me, even though I'm not a psycho, blinks back. And I think maybe I'm in love with you, or with killing you, or with death, or with drowning. Or maybe I'm mourning the woman in the Netflix movie who has been dead this whole time. Or maybe she hasn't died yet. Or maybe I'm her. Or maybe I'm at the bottom of the pond, and you're the person charged with sweeping the water from my flaky corpse. And this isn't the sea. There's too much seaweed for you to find me. But you never would have found me anyway, because I saw you on Tinder or Hinge or Bumble, and I swiped left because you smoke weed, and I guess I'm much too lordly or scared or not enough of a wannabe to like that, so my limbs are a melted milkshake, and I whispered in your ear, you didn't hear what I said, or maybe you did, you just didn't care. Either way, I became my reflection in the mirror, melted into the pond, the phone absorbed me, and I am Tinder or Hinge or Bumble, and you always, never, maybe, sometimes, more likely than not, more unlikely than yes, swipe left. Okay, the love poem. I know you guys are like gag. So now I'm gonna regale you with something else. So in a lot of my poems, I'm like, oh, I'm just a poet who writes about boys and bodies, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I'm a three-dimensional character. And I also had more socially, conscious poems. And so I want to share one from Wilting Daisies, one from high school, and then bring in two other more recent pieces that contrasted. Okay, from the book, I won't join your revolution. People keep telling me that in light of recent events, I should write a political poem, as if my words have the power to move mountains and change hearts. People tell me that I should charge forward with my pen held up like a sword, slashing injustice and unfairness, but my pen is just a pen. They say that when I speak, people listen, that I should use my words for good, as if my silly little poems are the answer, but I'm just a poet who writes about boys and bodies. I am not the answer. Regardless of how my voice echoes when I shout, it is still just a voice going up against shotguns. You want me to write about shotguns? What do I know about shotguns pointed at heads and fast-beating hearts? You want me to write about police officers, about dead Black boys? You want me to use my words to tear down walls? What do I know about tearing down walls? I'm a silly little poet who believes in world peace and coexistence. I don't want to tear down walls. I don't want to partake in riots and civil disobedience. I want to build bridges. So when you link arms with signs held high, hoods up, hands up, blackout clothes on, voices coming together in the night to speak up about how little Black boys and girls are scared of men in hoods and shotguns. Do not ask me to drag my pen across my dangerous skin and use my blood to write your battle cries. I can't do it. I'm not the strong Black woman that everyone expects me to be. I'm just a poet.
Wow.
So that was in high school. Believe it or not, I did end up writing political poems. So all I do is contradict myself. So this is from last year, and it's called For Briana. I write a lot of poems about death, metaphorical and symbolic death, of course. Poetry is death. Poetry is survival. Sad sells, you know? Not that I'm selling my poetry, but I guess in a way I am. Performing poetry is kind of an exchange. You take my sadness and I take your applause. No, it's poetry. We snap. Perhaps the vibrations that come off your middle fingers hitting your palms will create enough electricity to jumpstart my heart. I don't write poems for fun anymore. This isn't to say I quit. It's just that writing about death during a pandemic feels a bit tone deaf. These mostly functional lungs and this BMI way too high body make me a target. The system wants me dead, or at least they do nothing to protect me from dying. And now this water droplet villain is looking for easy pickings. Can't think about ventilators and hearts restarting now, though. Definitely can't think about poetry. How do you know you're grieving? Does it take a cadaver or a funeral broadcasted on all the major networks to really fire up your sad engines? Grief sneaks up on you most efficiently when you don't know you're grieving. No signs of sadness around, no tears in the forecast. Goodness gracious, I didn't even know her. 1 minute you're all wrecking ball and hear me. I will make you hear me. Briana Taylor, where's her justice? Where's her justice? People are honking their horns and you think, maybe I'm not in danger, maybe I'm safe, but then you're sitting on the edge of your twin bed, looking at the She Was Sleeping poster you threw together an hour before the protest, and suddenly you're full on sobbing, praying your sweet mates can't hear you because what would you say? I'm grieving a woman I ain't ever met. But she was mine, you know? She became mine as I walked up and down the streets, screaming for justice that will never be heard. Can we say her name back into existence? And this one, again, I'm going to take you guys on another journey. It's another one of these like social poems that I have, but it's funky. There's a little backstory to it. So this one is about forced sterilizations at the border, which is not anywhere near anything else I've spoken about. But it was something that crossed my path. And it also brings in Corregidora by Gail Jones and talks about generation making. So it's about race, it's about life, it's about women, it's about migration. Strap your seatbelts in. How the moon rules the sea. Why are you holding your stomach? She asks. Do you know what it means to have a black hole where your womb should be? She whispers. No. They do not speak. She rolls over in her cot, still clutching onto her abdomen, grasping for the ghost of. The moon hangs in the air, shining hopefully for all those who find hope in such things. Then it falls. It is replaced by a ball of fire. There are those who walk beneath the wrath of such a heat for days, in search of something better, in search of a place to make generations. They follow La Virgen's glow, cling onto her blue-green cloak, and trudge. ¿Y qué yo he de decir? Que yo estoy cansado, que el camino es largo y no se ve el fin. Can I? She reaches to touch the belly of the younger woman. She reaches to touch the belly that the younger woman rubs from moon to sun and sun to moon. The woman grabs her wrist. Where are your children? She hisses. In a cage. Then you have witnesses. The older woman shifts uncomfortably. The younger woman turns away and continues to rub her belly. She hums a lullaby, the only song that survived the desert. The older woman dreams that she reaches out to touch the younger woman's stomach, and her hand goes right through her. Both spend the night wailing in their sleep. The ocean sloshes back and forth to the tune of the soul surviving song. The moon plans its descent. Tell me about the doctor. The man stares into her eyes. His hand hovers over a tattered notebook. What are you? She asks, shielding her progeny from his grabbing hands. A storyteller, he explains in a soft, soothing voice. The woman laughs. It is a deep, unpleasant sound, the sound of a dying thing, craving death but bound to earth by life. You think you are innocent. The man shifts uncomfortably in his chair. They accuse us of coming to steal, coming to pillage, but all you people have done is rob me, and now, when all I have left is my story, you come to take it from me too. I'm here to amplify Vete al Diablo. If you listen quietly, you can hear the moon wailing. It mirrors the woman's laugh. Not all find hope in the moon. Daddy, what are you writing? I don't know. Do you have writer's block, Daddy? Am I a thief or a storyteller? The child pauses to ponder this. Neither. Then what am I? A world builder. What can I build? Something better. Far off in the house, the mother's arms wrap around her stomach. She moans quietly. The father detaches himself from the keyboard and drags himself up the stairs. He feels heavy. He feels burdened with the stories he has told, torn between being a witness and being a robber. What hurts? He asks. What doesn't? The mother replies. He rubs small circles on the base of her back, on each side of her spine. The father brews cup after cup of chamomile tea. He climbs up and down the stairs carrying tea and hot towels and socks filled with hot rice and bunches of ripe bananas. Each trip up the stairs makes him feel lighter, less like a thief and more like a healer. The moon makes its ascent, and the moans subside. He made it, the older woman shouts, sitting straight up in her cot, slick with sweat. She makes the sign of the cross over and over and over. What? The younger woman asks, slowly pulling out of her dream. In the dream, the baby was singing the lullaby from within her, making her body hum. She awakes with a song on her lips, but she does not sing. La Virgen came to me and showed me my husband and my oldest son. They are safe. She hugs her knees to her chest and rocks back and forth. The younger woman does not answer. The moon grows larger and larger and larger. The waves cannot contain their excitement, and the sea rises. The water sloshes up and overtakes the sand. The sea greets the earth like an old friend. The fish sing a familiar song. All those in the desert lay on their backs, floating quietly. The water rushes into the building and rusts the locks on the cages. The children float away in their sleep. Each child is placed carefully in their mother's arms. They drift and drift and drift. The younger woman is the only one who is awake. Out of the black hole where her womb should be emerges a baby. The blood mixes with salt water and the baby comes out cooing softly. She holds the baby to her chest. They drift and drift and drift. The mother's chamomile tea mixes with her blood. Both are drained from her body and mixes with the water. The ink that spills the father's stolen stories is lifted off the page. He is no longer a thief. The sea is now stained with afterbirth. The sea is now stained with sweat. The sea is now stained with pain. The sea is now stained with stolen stories. The moon reclaims all. Brianna, how am I doing on time?
You're doing good.
Can I? One more?
Go for it.
All right. Okay. I know it's a poetry. I know. I'm just going to do it and ask for forgiveness later. I brought a prose piece.
Ooh.
I dabbled with prose because I had to. So here it is. Okay, this one, again, I'm going to take you guys on another journey. I'm just the driver tonight. This is set in, well, you'll figure it out. This is called To Whom It May Concern. Someone knocks at the door and Nada is pulled out of her trance. She gathers all the letters, photographs, and journals and puts them into pots and pans. She carefully, quietly, as if not to disturb a mouse, stacks the pots and pans in cabinets. She does this out of an abundance of caution. There's no danger at the door. She knows that if this were a raid, there would be no time for safekeeping. There would be no knocking on doors. They would barge right in and burn everything. She closes the cabinet door quietly and looks around the kitchen, making sure everything looks the same. Wall paint where yellow thins to green. A large, hand-painted gruesome scene hangs over the kitchen table. Dead forest raccoon with salamanders crawling over it. One of the women in the house loved to paint dead things. She wonders which one. The knock repeats and she snaps out of her trance. She stands up and brushes the dust off her hands, retrieving her mask from the table and covering her mouth and nose with it before opening the door. You can never be too careful. Ahmad, she whispers, a hint of surprise in her voice. You asked me a few days ago why I come by so often. He stood there, looking a little unsteady. His kinky, usually unruly hair was tucked under his milkman cap. It's like in the movies. Once the new normal began, everyone fell into roles, and every role has a uniform. Not that there are movies anymore. They took those too. Ahmad's milkman uniform always looks a little wrinkled, like he began to iron it but walked away to do something else and never finished. I have an answer now. She smiles and gestures for him to answer. He takes off his mask and slips it into his breast pocket. She gestures at the couch, and he sits on the edge of it. Ahmad is always on the edge of staying and going. He is an ellipsis of a man, too fleeting to be a full thought, not mysterious enough to be a question mark. She returns after a moment, no longer wearing her mask, with a silver tray, a hot kettle of warm water, 2 teacups, 2 saucers, 2 small spoons, a small dish with sugar cubes, 2 tea bags, mint, of course, an appetizer plate with stale bread, another porcelain dish with homemade butter. Ahmad's eyes remain trained on her. He calculates her every move. Existing in the new normal, in an age of secret war with secret spies and unspoken rules, you learn how to keep watch. One small twitch of the eye, a flick of the wrist, all can be signs of lethal danger. You knew I was coming? He asks, a sparkle in his eye. She keeps her eyes trained on the tray, a small smile playing at her lips. Sometimes you visit me on Thursdays. I didn't know you were coming, but I hoped you would, she replies in a hesitant voice, pouring hot water into the cup. She hands him the teacup and saucer, and they shake in his hands. He smiles as he takes it. She sits in the armchair across from him. Well, mischief dances in her eyes as she looks at him above the teacup. If this were a movie, she would knock the tray off the table, knock the table off the carpet, drag him onto the floor, and he would do things that men with crazy eyes, disorganized minds, and strong arms do. Whether that be strangling her or having sex with her, that's up to you. Both are a kind of violence, both a form of occupancy, neither innocent. But of course, she knows nothing of movies. They took them all a long time ago. Her great-grandmother preferred plays anyway. Oh yes, it was maybe a year ago, maybe. I came to the door. I dropped off your milk, but your door was open. I feared for you. I leaned through the doorway to shut your door so you wouldn't be sighted. She shifts in her seat nervously. But then, right as I leaned in, you appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. I was wearing my great-grandmother's dress, she recalls. Red, with gold flowers. And you weren't wearing a mask. I remember this like it was yesterday. I gave you a start. You clutched your hands to your chest and let out a little squeal. He smiles as the image plays out in front of him. You're lucky I didn't throw a pan at you, she laughs. A woman of many secrets, she rarely ever laughs. She spends her days behind a typewriter, creating birth certificates. But Ahmad brings her walls down like they're made of ice. He melts them slowly, one by one, so she does not notice how comfortable she is. He opens her up like an onion, layer by layer. What a dangerous man. But you didn't. You just laughed, and I was charmed by your laugh. He looks away from her, shy, and takes a sip from his teacup. After a moment of silently enjoying each other's company, he speaks again. There were no rainbows, he says, almost to himself. What? There were no rainbows today. Not one rainbow. The shimmer in his eyes burnt out and left ashes in their wake. There will be fires this Sunday, she replies sadly. They sit in silence some more, mourning those who will die in the coming days. They never know which country will burn on Sinner Sunday. There are no televisions for news, no radios for late-night fireside chats. No one knows what they're next. I found another journal, scrapbook thing, she offers. Ahmad's eyes light up. Nada sets her teacup down and heads to the kitchen. He follows her lead. Close your eyes, she orders. He smirks, closes his eyes, and turns around as she retrieves her hidden treasures from the pots and pans. Okay. Ahmad turns, and the blowout candles in his eyes reignite. He joins her on the kitchen floor, crisscross applesauce in front of various piles of yellowing letters, stacks of journals, little fraying, ripped memories scattered across the tiles. Look at this one. She hands him a letter, written on thick paper with heavy ink. Dear Jodely, I've become a hot chocolate addict. Where did you find it? It's so authentic, and I cannot find chocolate anywhere anymore. They made us all get tested today. I'm going to mail you the mask as soon as possible. They're saying the strand is mutating, adapting. First it was water droplets, next it could be airborne. I stood in line with some unforgiving woman shoved a Q-tip up my nose. They said we would have rapid results, 5 to 10 minutes, tops. 30 minutes later and no results. The men all began to get antsy. We stood there, murmuring about what was taking so long. Something is coming, my love. I drove by the surplus field today. The course abandoned. I fear it could be famine. Take heed. I know you don't like technology, but I stored a box of batteries, flashlights, and other emergency gear in the floorboard to the right side of your bed, anticipating your warm embrace. Carmela. Ahmad looks up at Nada, whose eyes are wild with excitement. What year is this from? He asks. I don't know, but look at this journal. She dated every entry. It's a few years before she had my grandmother. She picks up the journal, flips to a page, and hands it to Ahmad. I hug Mom tight. Goodbye in a Denny's parking lot. I've been playing the game of life for far too long. I bet on things, knowing I'll lose. I don't play fully even when I know I'll win. I'm too young to want to tap out. I've been playing this game for far too long, realizing mid-play this game is for adults. What's Denny's? He asks. I don't know. What game is she talking about? I don't know. Nada works a simple job. She spends her days behind a typewriter creating birth certificates. This is a safe job. Many things about Nada's life are safe. Her job, her house, her letters and pictures and books, her great-grandmother's dresses from the days before uniforms hidden in a chest in her closet, trinkets and memories from a time past hidden underneath the floorboard to the right side of her bed. Safe, safe, safe. Ahmad is the exception. She lets him in, lets him break her walls down until she is comfortable, too comfortable. If the roles were reversed, if she were as alert as him, she would have noticed the small eye twist, the slight flick of the wrist. She would have noticed his face change as he read the letters. But no, she's safe. Safe, safe, safe. She does not have to look out for such things, which is why. Nada didn't notice that the journal in Ahmad's hands were on fire till the flames began to lick the letter in her hands. She didn't see the flick of the wrist with which he lit the match. I fear for you, he says blankly. For a moment, Nada thinks she sees sadness in his cold black eyes. But no, there's nothing there. The flame that once twinkled in those eyes is now running across her kitchen floor. What a dangerous man.
What was it called? What was your title?
Of the story?
Yeah.
To whom it may concern.
Do you want to get a drink of something? You must be parched, yeah. So why don't we just take a couple minutes if anyone needs to run to the bathroom? That was amazing.
You just go right in. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. I will.
You really took us on a journey today.
I hope it wasn't too wild.
It was not too wild, and I'm so happy that you ended with the prose piece. I didn't know it was going to happen, but it's awesome. It's actually really interesting because Richard, right?
I mean,
What's your name?
Robert.
Robert. So sorry. Robert and I met 2 weeks ago at another poetry event, and he asked me about the difference between prose and poetry. And is there a demarker between those two different forms? And it's really interesting because we sat here and we listened to your poetry for maybe 20 minutes, and then you pull out the prose. And I don't know about any of you, but to me, it was like it was unmistakable that it was a poet who wrote it. I mean, words like blowing out the candles in your eyes. I mean, it's gorgeous. But I was hoping you could speak to that, to what's the difference between the prose and the poetry in your work?
Me specifically, I like to blur the lines between prose and poetry. And when I say I like to blur the lines, I can't help it. As much as I try to shake being a poet, it's like intrinsic. Every time I try and write something, it's there, So like even when I go for prose, it's poetic prose, or it's like a hybrid work, or it's like even when I write essays, my professors are like, "Why?" I asked you for a research essay, like, "Why is it so pretty?" So yeah, there is a difference. I haven't found it yet. I don't know. I think one of the reasons why it's like indistinguishable with my work is because I think my poems often tell a story. So they have already a narrative like bent to them. So then when I'm actually telling a story, and then I've also got the poetic influences in it, you can't see the difference all the time. But like when you're looking at it visually, like this looks like prose, this looks like a poem, and I would say that's about it. Because I don't really follow any poetry rules either. Everything I write is just I do what I want. So yeah. I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way in regards to that, because when I do poetry, I don't really follow like forms, like things don't necessarily fit in like a soliloquy or like I think it's called a vanilla or like a sonnet. I just kind of just go with whatever, I guess wherever my mind takes me and what words come up. So some things I look at seem to be more prose in that sense, where I kind of feel like a prose may be less rhymey. So I guess that's the difference I kind of feel. But then again, certain poems there's no rhymes at all. So yeah.
And let's actually talk about that 14-line poem. That was the Bible rewritten. That was not 14 lines. But it's really interesting that you based a poem on this rule, this hard and fast, love is supposed to be described in the Shakespearean sonnet. And you just said, you know what? I don't care. So let's talk about that.
I took a poetry class, and we were reading sonnets in that class. And some of the sonnets we were reading were, oh my goodness, I think it's called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. I want to say it's by Tarah Agathe. Don't quote me. But they're really beautiful. And it's a book of sonnets all by that same title. And so we were tasked with writing sonnets where each sonnet had the same title. And I was looking at the Petrarchan sonnet, and I was like, okay, we got the 14 lines, got the volta and the 7th or 8th line. And I was like, first of all, I don't even know what iambic pentameter really sounds like, so I would forget that. And then I love, like, Pablo Neruda writes about, like, I want to eat your hot heart. I read that, and I was like, Pablo's not okay. And I was like, well, neither am I. So I kind of took that, and I was like, I just wanted to embody, like, this, like, fantastical love that's, like, just deranged. But it's really, like, the way, like, young people go about love. We're like, yeah, this situation is toxic and dangerous, and I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna fix it, which makes no sense, but like it's what we do. And so like that's why like the poem eats itself in a way. Like, so as the sonnets evolve, like they start off really like beautiful and romantic, and then you just like see that it's like scary. But I also find my sonnets so romantic, even though they're like, you guys, I read them and you guys were like. Yeah.
I think we were all kind of overtaken with the emotion, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way that you read. So it's very interesting because I could have read that, and the emphasis that I would have put in it, the natural cadence is different. So do you write for the eye or for the ear? Can you talk about how you go about putting those syllables together?
Yeah, so both. I think I used to write a lot to perform because I used to perform a lot more. So I wrote for the ear mostly, and I haven't shook it. So I think a lot of the times the way I write is so that it'll sound the way I want it to. So like, I don't know if I did this honest justice, but they're supposed to be like flowery and pretty, and then I just like take you with me, like you're just dragged. That's how it's supposed to sound. And like probably when you read it, it looks a lot more natural because you see it kind of like pretty, and then you're like, what's going on here? So yeah, I do a combination of the two, but also sometimes every time I perform a piece, I change it. Like so, the inflections could be different, the focus could be different. Sometimes I rehearse, sometimes I don't. So you could get a different poem every time you hear it, which is what I think is like really nice about poetry because it is on a page, but it doesn't like live on the page.
Absolutely. And I think that a really wonderful part of today's reading is the way that you put yourself in conversation with yourself. And I think that there were several themes that came out there with the political piece and then also with the love stories. So how do you think that having distance from your work has not only changed the way you think about it, but the way that you read it?
Yeah, Wilting Daisies, I always laugh when I think about it because I remember in high school I was like, yeah, I'm like the best poet ever. Like, and I put it out and I was like, mic drop. And I look back at it and I'm like, who wrote that? And so, but I also, it's like I haven't changed. You know, like I've refined some of the like wild, dramatic, gross love in the poems, but it's just been turned into like a dark kind of like strangeness. So I think there's a lot of parallel between how I used to write and how I write now. So yeah, I think it's more like it's not like I've changed. I've just kind of evolved, or maybe like grown into my style. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, growing up with you and knowing you, it was like I was listening to these poems, like, wow, Tarah had a lot going on. I had no dates, but apparently you had all of them. So I'd love to talk about narrator. One of the things that I noticed is that in the earlier works, they seemed, I mean, this is just me assuming, but it seemed to be like it was about you. And then as you get older, you seem to move outside of yourself. You're talking about other people, other topics. So is that narrator you? And how do you feel that you have situated yourself in the work or outside of the work?
Yeah, so in high school, I definitely thought I was the main character of my own television show. So yeah, a lot of the poems are just like, my world, and now I'm kind of like, I think especially with like the I Won't Join Your Revolution, I think I wrote that from a place of like, how could I write about social issues? Like, what do I have to, like, I go to school in the suburbs. I live a pretty cushy life. Like, what do I have to say about injustice? But then I think I kind of got to I just kept writing, and I realized that, like, no, I don't really want to write about like gushy things anymore because there's like real things happening in the world. And sometimes when I read my poems, people listen. And so I don't know, like I felt like I had to do more than just write love poems. But I also find that like my kind of like poems with a social twist are love poems in a way, in that I feel like I'm called to love the world, which sounds super like daisy and sunflowery and floaty, but like I really do. And I feel like my way of loving the world is just by just like calling out the things that I see and like being a world builder in my pieces. Just like imagining, like freedom dreaming something beautiful in my pieces.
That's very poignant. That one piece when you say that, why should I speak on this? Who cares? I'm just a poet. In the last few years since the inauguration, I mean, Amanda Gorman kind of exploded onto the scene. And really, I mean, this Poet Laureate project is partially as a result of that popularity. So when you were saying those words, I'm just a poet, do you reflect on that now? Do you think differently?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. In high school, like being a poet was like my thing. Like people knew me because I was a poet. It was fun. Da, 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 da,
Yes, it was.
you know? But like then I kind of grew out of that where I was like, no, it's like I'm not, I don't want to say I'm an activist poet, but I think like activist poetry is what is being used right now. And I think Audre Lorde said it best, like poetry is not a luxury. And so sometimes when I write, especially if I know I'm going to share my writing, I try and write about something that matters because if I'm taking up the space, I might as well be doing something with it. And so, yeah, I think just a poet isn't a thing anymore. Like every poet, even if you're writing about like flowers, flowers are very important. I write about flowers a lot, making fun of myself. I think like every poet is like doing something so much more than poetry. It's like, what is poetry if not reinventing the world before you?
Absolutely. So maybe let's dig a little deeper into that. Do you think that poets have a responsibility to speak on issues?
I don't want to call it a responsibility because I think poetry, even though some people use poetry as like an outlet for activism and justice, like poetry's for everyone. And I think for a lot of people, poetry is also like therapy in a way, like it's therapeutic to write through your personal emotions. And so I think that like poetry doesn't always have to be outward facing. I think though, if you are like a poet with like a lot of people are following you, listening to you, hearing what you have to say, then like it should be a consideration. Maybe not a responsibility, but at least a consideration that if you have this ability to remake the world or to make it beautiful, like perhaps like bring something in. But I also think that like sometimes poetry is an escape for some people and they don't want to, be slapped in the face like heavy hitting like social commentary every time they read a poem. So yeah, that's why like a lot of my social poems are also infused with humor usually, sometimes. And so it's kind of like I'm pulling you in, but I'm not like knocking you over the head with it.
Absolutely. One of the lines that really jumped out to me in your older work was, I want to be your ventilator.
Mhm.
And it's just so interesting sitting here today. And then actually in another poem, hearing you talk about a ventilator again, how do you feel that time changes your poetry? And do you feel that when you put it out into the world and you let it mature and ripen, that you lose the meaning, or do you think that it transmutes itself?
I think, I think poetry grows.
Mhm.
Sometimes some of my poems, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna leave that one in the history books. But others, I'm like, okay, like this has grown on me, and like I see where I was going with this. But yeah, I think anything. I mean, like if you think about like even literature, like the classics are classics for a reason. Like they're good, and even though they were written so long ago, it's like we read them and we're like, yeah, I'm there right with you. But like not everything's a classic. So like some of my poetry ages well, and some of it I'm like, not so much.
Well, one of the things that really struck me was you said you were going to do some political poems, and you said you do one from the beginning and then one from a few from now. And you read that one, the first one about police brutality and violence, and then you said, and now I'm going to read the ones from now. And I said, wait, that it was timeless. So how does that make you feel that some poems change so much and then other ones we're still dealing with the same problems?
Yeah, it's a lot. I have another poem called Death in a Garden, which I didn't bring because it's like sad. It was kind of like my I'm never writing poetry again poem. And it's kind of just about like it was just like it was a poem from such a place of like I can't do this anymore, where I was like I felt like I was just like shouting into the void about all these social issues with my poems, and like nothing was changing and no one was listening, and I was like, yeah, I just can't write anymore because like no, like nothing is happening. But like I don't, there's like so much hope in poetry, because it's like, even though I said I was never going to write again, well, it didn't really work out for me. So I'm still writing. But like the world will always be there and all these problems will always be there, but like that doesn't mean that we shouldn't still have hope. Like I have just like buckets of hope, like bottomless buckets of hope. Because if I didn't, like, why would I be doing this? You know, like, so it kind of like, even though the poems are still, like, they still sound the same, like, I Won't Join Your Revolution, I could have read that, you know, I could have written that tomorrow
Yeah.
and it'd still be relevant, but it's like still necessary too.
Oh, absolutely necessary. So I was wondering how many of you guys are writers yourselves? Just a little show of hands. I'm not going to report you. Okay. Yeah, okay. So we have some writers in the group. And I think one of the most interesting things about being a poet is that you write about being fed up about writing poems. How do you have those periods of stops and starts? How do you approach writing when you're not feeling it or when you don't know where it's going to take you?
I feel like I've had writer's block since I was born, and I'm just writing through it. I think, like, kind of in those moments, I think what really helps me is, like, my friends or, like, other people, like, because I think my friends are, like, my biggest fans ever. Like, I can write the most ridiculous nonsense, and they're like, wow, so profound. And so, like, even when I'm feeling like, yeah, I don't want to be a writer, I'm not very good at it, then my friends will, like, boost me up. So I say, like, if you're a writer, if you're a writer and you feel like there's no point in writing, yeah, turn to your yes man or your yes woman, because that's their job. They're gonna hype you up, and then, you know, you'll get that little, you'll want to do it again. But also, like, I stopped writing for a while, like after I didn't have to write for assignments, and then I thought, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna write anymore. I'm not a poet anymore. I'm done. I'm good. I'm retired. And then I found myself writing again. Like, I don't even know how, but it was like I was writing in my head. Like, I was writing poems as I was driving. In the shower, I'm writing a poem. And then I was like, all right, well, I guess I gotta write it down if it's just gonna haunt me all the time.
So you're in the shower. There's obviously no paper. Walk me through the process. Do you have a line in your head? Do you come back to it? How does Tarah write her poetry?
Usually, most of my poems are written at a time when I have no access to anything to write it down. So I've got the line, I'm walking around with it, and it's like hitting, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write this down, da, da, da. And then most of my poems, I would say, are written between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Perfect window. I would say everything is like the best thing you've ever written in those hours. And so, like, you know, something, I'll think of a line or an idea or something during the day, and then at night I'll be like, all right, I gotta write this. And then I'll start and I just let the poem take me. That's why a lot of my pieces are kind of disjointed, because like the beginning will look like it's going somewhere, and then by the end you're like, oh, because like that's how it is. Like I let the poem like tell me what it's about sometimes.
Absolutely. So let's just talk about like the biggest inspirations for you. What do you see? Is it an image? I think that when we were listening to the ice cream poem, it was almost like we were standing there at, you know, an ice cream store, a shop. So what gets you in the mood? What a long
You're good. That poem specifically, Crescent Ridge Dairy Bar. My parents have been going there since before I was born. So that poem specifically. But usually it's like, I don't know. Usually it's like either a title. Sometimes I'm driven by a title. I'm like, I want to write this poem about this. Sometimes it's like a thing, like, you know, some sort of like something totally random, like a moment. And I'm like, okay, I know how this moment happened, right? Like I walked in, I ordered a smoothie, but then I'm like, but how did it happen? And it's like, the wind pushed me into the blah, blah, blah. And then like the poetry. And I'm like, how do I write this from the eyes of a poet? So sometimes it's like that. But usually it's like some sort of idea or subject or title or something like moves me, and then I just like run with it. Or I have an idea of like, oh, I want to write a poem about this, and it's gonna go, and like I have like the stops the poems will take, but then it just like, you know,
Yeah, it's one of those things where method is never going to be step 1, 2, and 3. But it's always nice to hear about what other writers are doing, and it's nice to hear that we're all kind of clueless about it. And I'm not, missing a light bulb moment here. So you talk about your forward-facing work. I think that it's really interesting because you're someone who chose to make your work forward-facing so early. So can you talk us through that process? What's it like to self-publish?
Self-publishing is a lot of research, and then whatever you do, it's never going to be what you expect. I'll say that now. I actually self-published as like a senior independent project. I was like, I have this idea, I want to do this thing, and I figured it'd be pretty easy. Slap some words on a page, publish it. I had like self-publishing for dummies. I was like all over the internet. I was like reading like 5 books on like how to do it, and it's like there's so many different options and avenues. But I just kind of knew that like people like to read, people like to hear what I had to like my poems, and I figured like, okay, like I'll write this book and like my 5 friends will get it, and it'll be like cool. But then it just got to be so much more of a fun project. Like I had like a little book release party, like 7 people came, 5 of them were teachers. I had like t-shirts, and it was just like, it's just fun. Like I feel like in high school, I was like so obsessed with the idea of like being a famous writer. I was like, I want to be John Green. Like that was like the goal. And now I'm like, no, I just want, my 5 friends to read the few goofy poems I write, and like other people, So I think that's like pretty much what it was like. It was like just like I had this idea, and I had like teachers and friends and family who were supportive, and I just like ran with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's knock your socks off. Impressive that you were able to get that done. For people who might be thinking about doing the same thing, what is the one piece of advice that you would give them on how to start the process?
I would say just research. There's like so many different ways of doing it now, because I think like small writers are starting to notice that like I feel like everything's a game or a market. And it's like, if you don't know Fulano and Fulana's cousin who works at a printing press and whatever, like, we don't all have to be big ticket, hot shot, front of Barnes and Noble's booksellers. If you are just looking to like put something out there, have something you're proud of, share it with the people who love you, people who want to read your work, like just do the research and figure out like what works for you, whether it's printing on demand, whether it's like large printing, whether you go through, a small publishing press or a huge, whatever. Just like do the research and don't give up.
Well, you might not be big ticket Barnes and Noble yet, but you're going to get there, and we're all going to be able to say that we met you. Praying to God Barnes and Noble's still open. Because I have a $10 gift card I have not used. Thanks for reminding me. Maybe I'll put a down payment on a $15 magazine. Ridiculous. So what do you think the future of poetry is? A couple years ago, we might have said, "Oh, that's what the dead guys did." Where do you see poetry going? And do you think it's going to have? Do you think it's going to have this kind of chokehold that it does have on popular culture right now into the future?
I think so. Yeah, I think poetry is booming. Like, I think people are starting to realize that like all of the things that we thought we couldn't do, all us regular folk can certainly do it. Like, I think like we kind of looked at it and we were like, yeah, you have to have like gone to, I don't know, some fancy hotshot school and studied like British lit to write a book. No, you don't. You need like a pen, a paper, and some free time. And I think poetry is just like, I think with social media, like poems are getting shorter. I will say that. But I think that like, I don't think poetry is going anywhere. Like, I don't think it's like a phase. Because poetry's always been around. And I think like the popular hold it has on it will like transform poetry a little bit. Like it'll be different, it'll be more on media, stuff like that. But I don't think poetry's going anywhere.
You heard it here, folks. It's not going anywhere. So, if anyone has any questions, we can open up the floor for discussion. If you have any points that you want to make, anything you want to explain.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about your editing process? I mean, you say you do this thing from 10 o'clock until 4 a.m. Is it done then, or are you fine-tuning, working through it for a couple of days, or do you put something away for a little bit, bring it back out, and look at it again?
No, please don't tell my other English teachers this, but I don't edit my work at all. It's usually I write it and I don't look at it. Or sometimes I have had poems that I go back to. I was looking at Wilting Daisies the other day and I found typos. So like proof that no, I don't edit my work. But sometimes I think if I were to publish again, I definitely would go back and like make sure my poems didn't sound silly, or just like, make sure that they're like where I want them to be, like at the caliber that I want. I would say that like this book, everything in it is like exactly how I expected it to be, which means that like I did look at it. I spent a lot of time going through these poems and making sure they like sounded how I wanted and looked how I wanted. But normally like for a day-to-day, like, any poem that I would just read, I usually don't look at it. Sometimes though, when I'm preparing to perform, and I'm like practicing my pieces, I'll edit them while I practice because something like won't sound right. Or like if I do multilingual poems, I know that like there are some words that I'm gonna stumble over, so I'll switch the language to something that's easier to say or something. Yes.
May I ask, who's the English teacher?
Is he in the back?
Lucky you. Lucky you, but I think you know that. Tara, I liked all of your poetry from every era that was there. It's quite good, and again, lucky you. And boys are like ice cream. I very much like that. And one of the things that it occurred to me in listening to you is that, ice cream sits in a frozen state and nothing really happens there. It's when we take it out of the frozen state that it becomes, and it exists for two things to happen. It's going to be consumed or it's just simply going to melt away. Mm-hmm. And I sort of felt that going through with what you were doing, and enjoyed this very, very much. I may have to slip out a little early I'd rather just keep staying. And I feel very fortunate for being here tonight. And I feel a little sad for anybody who didn't get to be in this room tonight. Well done. Thank you so very much for what you've done. So it's all valuable. It's all valuable. Always will be.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I'll put in a good word with the director of the library.
Yeah, tell her to pay me.
This is a great idea. This is a very good thing, a very, very good thing. It's all valuable.
Thank you.
I valued it all. I liked it. You had me writing a lot. So.
Thank you. I know, I saw you take notes, and when you raised your hand, I was like.
You forgot a comment. What do you mean he's an ellipses? Come on, man. That's wonderful. No, well done you. You're doing a marvelous job.
Thank you. Well, it's great when we have such wonderful local talent.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a quick question. About your book, is it like all centered around like a theme, or is it just like whatever you like come across?
The book is it's divided into 3 slots. Me, which me are poems about myself, and also they're like some of the social pieces. Like I have kind of like the first piece is about homework and how I was just not sleeping in high school. Then the second piece is about just like the hypersexualization of young people. And then I have my like the political poem, I Will Join the Revolution. Then it's You. Those are love poems. And then The Other Guy, which are more love poems. So in my future works, there will be less love poems. But yeah, like that's how I broke this one up.
And so then, like, in regards to like the publishing aspect, did you go through like a local publisher or?
No. So the way I self-published was through what was it called back then? I don't remember what it was called, but it was through Amazon. Sorry. In the future, though, I would say that is the easiest way. Like Ingram Spark, Create Space, all these things. Like if you want to self-publish a book, you could do it in 2 hours. You know, like it's not difficult. It's super easy. If you want to go through big companies, I think if I were to do something in the future, I would want to go the local route. And like partner with a local publishing company or something like that. But I've seen all other people do these like other ways where it's like, I don't know, you need like 70 people to pre-order your book before they'll print one. So there's like a bunch of different ways. But the way I did it was the easiest way.
And that was through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So
It was also the cheapest way. You don't have to put any money down.
So they like, do you come up with like the cover and everything? Like,
Yeah. So what I did might be illegal, but I used this other book publishing company's formatting tool to format the book, and then I just downloaded the PDF and uploaded it to Amazon self-publishing thing. So again, in the future, I probably would not format it myself because, as you can see, it's just words, and I wanted to do like illustrations and stuff, but I didn't get around to it. But yeah, so super duper easy.
And then I noticed there was a question that Briana had asked, and it was like, I noticed that within, I think, was it in the prose where you said, am I a thief or a storyteller? Mm-hmm. And then the next line was, you're neither, you're a world builder. And I noticed you said that as well. So like, are there like certain things that maybe you say to yourself that eventually like it comes back into like a poem somewhere? Yeah,
so that piece actually came out of, we learned about the forced sterilizations at the border in my class, and my professor was like, all right, well, we talked about different like social issues in this class, like I want you guys to write about it. And all my classmates were like, no, we can't. We're stealing their experience. Like, we can't do that, or something like that. And I was like, so you're not going to write about something because what? Like, you're afraid that, like, someone's going to call you out for writing about it? And so I was like, I don't know. Like, I was intrigued by this idea, but I also understood the tension of it's like when I'm telling a story that's, like, not mine, am I a thief? Or am I a storyteller? And so, like, there's, like, tension with the storyteller in that piece because it's kind of like you can see like her anger that he's come to steal her story, but it's kind of like, I don't know, like I like to, I don't always resolve things in my pieces. Sometimes there's like tension between the things that I can't, reconcile myself.
So it's almost like sometimes the characters within your piece reflect like what you're going through. Yeah, most definitely. Usually, I mean, people always say like write what you know. Yeah. So a lot of my characters are just like aspects of me or aspects of people I know. I'm never afraid about writing about people I know. Change their names, give them blue eyes, they have brown eyes, and then publish the thing. And if they know it's them. I mean, like, these poems were about boys I went to high school with, and then I performed it at my high school. They were like, is this about me? And I was like, art is subjective. What are they going to do? Arrest you?
I'd love to know which guy at our school was worth the whole book because I must have not been looking. Do you know?
I'm wondering the same thing.
Right? You could tell me later. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say, I'm fascinated by like you said, you evolve, right? You're the same and you evolve. I was, Briana's obviously been, hyping you up, and like we're going to have Tarah here reading poetry, and I read your book over the weekend, and I was some pretty serious, like high school, I have an 18-year-old at home, this is some serious high school stuff, and I was very curious how 2022 Tara was gonna look at this book from a few years ago, and it, honestly, you did such a great job, and I think when I talk to young people who write, you just gave me so much material to say, like, you keep doing what you're doing, right? I think a lot of people, like, they put it in the history books, and mom is gonna say that in her scrapbook, and I never wanna see it again. But you put a lot of power to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know, you have so much presence. I'm like, when I was in school, it was, you do. I mean, I guess things are so much different now, but yeah, it's like you are a performer, you're an artist. And it looks like you can do all parts, the poetry and the drama and the way you speak, and yeah. It was really, really good.
Thank you.
So I was hyping her up for a reason, guys.
So what are you doing next?
Okay. Yeah, this is gonna be, and I'm taking you on another wild ride. So I wanted to be an English teacher, and then I got to undergrad, and then I changed my mind, and then I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I picked up a poli-sci minor, and I was like, yeah, I don't like this. And then I was like, okay, I'll be a scholar, and I picked up an American ethnic studies minor, and I was like, I don't want to be a scholar. And then, like, I don't know, like halfway through my last semester, I was like, well, I think I'm going to apply to grad school and study theology. So I'm a first-year Master of Divinity student, and I'm working on getting my Master of Divinity in hopes of being a youth minister. But I'm still writing, and I think I might be dancing in the world of theopoetics in the future, which is like theology meets poetry. But I'll still be writing about boys. One of the boys will just be Jesus. So that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, I'll be a youth minister, God willing.
Do you still perform? Oh, sorry.
I still perform because people like this lady here keep asking me to. Yeah, I used to perform at an Unlikely Story in Plainville before COVID. I haven't been there in a while though. But like, yeah, I mostly just perform when people ask me to. So here and there, you might see me.
Is there a next performance?
No, not yet. But
So I'm not your scheduler.
not
Stay
yet.
in touch and let us know so we can share.
I'm always
Yeah.
around. If you ever have like an event at anything and you're looking for me to come be Bob and read poems, I'm here.
That's great.
Yeah, I was just wondering if any of your sermons would be poems down the road.
Oh,
Yeah, well, if she writes prose,
Breaking
like
out more.
poetry, yeah.
now they will.
definitely.
I actually, one of my friends asked me to come do a talk at his confirmation class, and so I've been kind of mixing poetry and prayer. So I do like these kind of outside of the box, like healing exercise prayers that are like that pull in poetry to prayer. So
Like songs.
yeah, like songs and stuff.
Question on inspiration. What books for both of you, actually, what do you suggest to inspire poetry? Like, I really enjoyed your poetry because I could attach myself to it enough to understand maybe not what you were intending, but I had an understanding, which sometimes poetry is difficult for me. So what would you suggest for something to read?
I love watching button poetry on YouTube.
Okay.
They have a bunch of spoken word poems, and that's like, I pretty much started performing by watching other people perform and seeing what they do. So like, and I think those ones are really easy to digest because they're meant, you can't see the poem, so like they're meant to be like something you can like latch onto. I love button poems.
Button poems.
Yeah. Rudy Francisco, he also writes he has books as well. I love his poetry, and it's like, you can get into it. It's not like super heady. It's like real words.
Can I suggest another poet? Is one of my favorites, is Shane Coyson. I've actually seen it perform a couple of times. And again, that same idea, just very approachable, but pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I think that one of the easiest to read poets is Jane Gregory. Yeah, No is a beautiful book. It starts with knock, knock, and she invites you right on in. And then her teacher and mentor, Michael Joyce, he's actually works in the world of intertext, which is the idea of hyperlinking and making the story a 3D kind of experience. So you're reading the words, but you can also click on a link and it takes you somewhere else. He wrote 20th Century Man, which is prose, but his hagiography of heaven and earth is beautifully ornate, but then also very readable and very understandable. So it gives you that very high art, highfalutin vibe, but it sucks you right in.
You said Jane
Gregory.
Gregory.
Jane Gregory. Yeah, no.
Jane Gregory. Thank you.
Anyone else have any? I always want to read more. I believe we have a display. Yeah, I pulled some books, and there's a wall where there are like flowers that you can put up like a favorite line, and I pulled some of my favorite books over there that can be checked out if you'd like. Yeah. And Wilting Daisies will be in circulation.
Do you have any copies tonight?
No.
But they're on Amazon.
And also Barnes, you
Sold
can
them
like
to
order
us
it from
tonight.
Barnes. I know it. You can also order it from Barnes and Nobles, from their website, or if you just Google it.
Or maybe not at the library, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not scanned in, so if you put it under your shirt,
Run.
But the library director is right here, so.
Whoops.
it's like a murder mystery. There's only so many people in the room.
Oh, gosh.
Any final words? Bueller?
Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Lovely,
That was
evening.
wonderful, yeah. So glad.
Well, thank you, Tara, for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, always. If anyone wants to stick around and get up close and personal, maybe shake your hand, take a photo, it's going to be worth a lot more later down the road. Thank you guys all for coming. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Help yourselves to cookies and lemonade, and there's a few flyers over there. We started a poetry discussion group that meets once a month on a